to believe, of their paid vacation. They refuse to reopen the House while families go hungry, while civil servants across our country are furloughed. House Republicans are missing in action. It is shameful, and it should offend every American the way in which House Republicans have debased the Article I branch of our government. They have an obligation to be here with us to work in good faith to reopen the government. Now, that is the backdrop to the topic that has brought us together this morning, which is that the Trump administration has made a conscious and deliberate choice to suspend SNAP benefits. They've done so notwithstanding, as you'll hear from Ranking Member Craig and the tremendous leaders who join me today, that the funds are sitting in a contingency account. Over $5 billion available today that could be used, that must be used under the law so that hungry families don't starve. And for my Republican colleagues who suggest all sorts of fanciful rationales for why the administration has been unwilling to do so, I would just simply say it is outrageous that the Trump administration can come up with $40 billion to bail out Argentina and refuses to spend the money that Congress has appropriated to feed hungry families in America. Outrageous. And House Democrats won't stand for it. And the person who has been leading the charge in that regard is a dear friend of mine, a tremendous leader for the people of Minnesota, and the lead Democrat on the House Agriculture Committee, and that is Ranking Member Angie Craig.
Well, thank you so much, Assistant Leader Neguse. We are here today, all of us, because President Trump and Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins have chosen to take food away from 42 million Americans, 16 million children, 8 million seniors, 1.2 million veterans in our country. They could work with Democrats to find a way to protect the American people from having their health care premiums skyrocket Saturday morning. People are going to get up the first day of open enrollment. They're going to check the websites or those links, and they are going to see their premiums skyrocket. The very same day that Americans have run out of SNAP assistance because the Trump administration has decided, an active decision, not to reload those cards. The Trump administration has the appropriated funds and the legal authority to pay SNAP benefits in November, plain and simple. Refusing to use the appropriated funds is against the law, as a multi-state coalition of 26 attorneys general alleged in a lawsuit filed yesterday afternoon. If the president wanted to help feed hungry American children, he would. His actions display a pattern of callous disregard for America's hungry seniors, children, and veterans. Let's recall, this is on top of the following from this administration this year. They canceled $500 million worth of food for local food banks. They canceled the local Food for Schools program. They cut SNAP by $186 billion in the big ugly bill. In the case of November SNAP benefits, this administration's hands are not tied. Withholding food from hungry children, seniors, people with disabilities, and veterans is a choice. The law is clear and unambiguous on this point. I'm calling on the president to get back from Asia, to do the right thing and the moral thing. I'm calling on the president to follow the law. And where are my Republican colleagues? Silent? Complicit? They have a responsibility to their constituents not to go along with this cruel behavior. This administration must stop playing politics with America's hungry seniors, veterans, and children. And with that, I would be honored to introduce my Agriculture Committee colleague and friend, Representative Nikki Budzinski.
Thank you, Ranking Member Craig. I'm so proud to stand here alongside you and my other colleagues today. Over the past few months, my agriculture colleagues and I have been on the front lines of Republicans' ongoing attacks on SNAP in committee. Now, on day 29 of this shutdown, we are seeing SNAP caught in the crossfires again. Despite the government shutdown, the USDA has roughly $6 billion in congressionally appropriated contingency funding set aside for SNAP emergencies, as was mentioned by our ranking member. While that amount isn't enough to cover the full benefits, it could at least provide partial support to millions of Americans who rely on this program. But now USDA, as has been mentioned, is claiming it cannot use those funds, arguing that because benefits of fiscal year 2026 have not been appropriated, the program no longer exists. That is just unprecedented. States, including my own in Illinois, are rightfully suing. And instead of stepping up to help families put food on the table, this administration is continuing to play politics. On Tuesday, a banner appeared on the USDA's own website blaming Democrats for the potential interruption for food assistance. It read, quote, "Bottom line, the well has run dry. At this time, there will be no benefits issued November 1st. That's a lie, and it proves a hard truth to swallow. They don't want to help. They cut billions from SNAP to root out what they refer to as waste, fraud, and abuse. They did it to hand out even more tax breaks to billionaires. When given the choice between billionaires and working families, between corporate tax breaks and children who rely on just $6 a day to get by, they have made their choice, and it is shameful. And to the billions, and to that, the billions in cuts in this so-called one big beautiful bill is added. I've met with parents who already are struggling to stretch every grocery dollar. These new cuts will be devastating. This week, I led the Illinois Democratic House delegation in expressing serious concerns to Secretary Rollins about this change. Rushing implementation without proper guidance will cause preventable loss of benefits for eligible individuals at a time when budgets are already stretched thin due to rising costs. Somehow, there's enough money to send $40 billion to Argentina, enough to buy Kristi Noem a new plane, and enough to increase ICE funding by 400%, but not enough to make sure kids in this country don't go hungry. And we can, quite frankly, as a country, do a hell of a lot better than that. And so with that, I am going to introduce my Agriculture Committee member and good friend, Salud Carbajal.
Thank you, Nikki, and thank you to our colleague, Assistant Leader Neguse, for putting this presser together. As was said, I'm Salud Carbajal. I represent California's 24th Congressional District. Because of this manufactured Republican shutdown, we're on the verge of seeing the most vulnerable amongst us, seniors, children, go hungry. This past week, I had the fortune of visiting one of our area food banks in my district that serves more than 200,000 people annually. The staff shared with me their concern that if this congressional Washington gridlock continues, it's going to push people towards a hunger cliff. And I share their concerns. If Republicans in Congress don't act to end their shutdown soon, more than 100,000 people on the Central Coast of California, including millions throughout the country, could lose their SNAP benefits within days. This means families, children, and seniors will go hungry because of the political decision made by the Trump administration. You heard about the contingency fund that exists. When it suits them, they have all the funds in the world. When it doesn't, of course not. There's nothing. Food banks are stepping up to serve our community members as best as they can, but nothing can replace the lifeline that SNAP program provides. Let's be clear. This cost of living crisis and government shutdown was manufactured by Donald Trump and Republicans, who would rather let our most vulnerable citizens and children go hungry than sit down at the table with Democrats to negotiate. Trump and the Republicans claim they don't have money to help our citizens during this crisis. But as it was mentioned earlier, what do they have money for? $300 million for a luxury ballroom at the White House, $200 million for luxury jets for Secretary Nome, and $40 billion to bail out his right-wing friend in Argentina. Actions speak louder than words. We've heard that adage before. My House Democrat colleagues and I are here in Washington, not on vacation, here in Washington today, ready to negotiate a responsible bipartisan funding agreement that keeps food on the table, protects health care for all Americans, and reopens our government. It's time for Republicans to put partisanship aside and work with Democrats to open our government. Thank you. And with that, it is now my honor and pleasure to introduce my good friend and a leader in Congress, Representative Shontel Brown.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to Assistant Democratic Leader Congressman Neguse for organizing this press conference and for inviting me to be here. I am Congresswoman Shontel Brown, proudly representing Cleveland and Northeast Ohio. I serve as Vice-Ranking Member on the House Agriculture Committee, where we've been on the front lines fighting attacks on basic food benefits all year. Now we're here today because the president is illegally blocking $6 billion in emergency SNAP funding, money available and intended for moments exactly like this. Why? In some cynical attempt to increase leverage so they don't have to fix the healthcare crisis they've created. They're forcing American families to go hungry rather than lowering healthcare costs. I wish I could say I was surprised. But this is the same president and Republican Congress that made the largest cuts to SNAP and Medicaid earlier this year to pay for tax breaks for the wealthiest Americans. That made those tax breaks for billionaires permanent, but refused to extend enhanced premium tax credits for even 1 year. And that found $20 billion for a bailout for Argentina, but is freezing $6 billion sitting in the SNAP contingency fund. 21% of the people in my district rely on SNAP to keep food on the table. That's 1 in 5. So when it comes to Trump's illegal SNAP shutdown, I take this personally because the people I represent do not deserve the pain and stress and anxiety and hunger that this is going to cause. Last week, we held an event in my district at a local grocery store. And a woman there named Diane spoke about what SNAP means to her. She's not just a woman, she's a pillar in the community, spending many of her days advocating for others. And I've not been able to stop thinking about what she said. She's 75 years old, lives in public housing, and gets $63 a month in SNAP benefits for food. And she needs every dollar of that to survive. Standing at the supermarket, she looked at the food laid out: a package of ground beef, some canned food, some fruit, and a loaf of bread. She pointed out she already isn't able to afford that much on her budget. Diane does not deserve this. And somebody in the White House, somebody in Speaker Johnson's office, they may think this is a brilliant strategy that they have to threaten Diane and to take from Diane, but I'm going to call it out for what it really is. It is cruel. It is callous. It is careless. It is immoral, and it is illegal. See, this is what happened when people in power only care about people with perceived power. It is time for the White House to release the funds. It is time for Republicans to take the locks off the doors of the House chamber. And instead of doing the extreme right-wing thing for Donald Trump It is time for my Republican colleagues to do the right thing for the people we represent. Reopen the government, release the funds, and cancel the cuts. And with that, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce the Congresswoman from New Mexico, Melanie Stansberry.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Congresswoman Melanie Stansberry, and I am deeply proud to represent New Mexico's 1st Congressional District, but I'll be honest, I'm deeply ashamed to have to stand here today as our country is on the brink of a food and hunger crisis that is completely manufactured by the White House. So let me start out by saying this. Mr. President, Leader Thune, Speaker Johnson, if you are watching this, American lives are not a political game. 42 million Americans, half of them children, will not be able to put food on the table on Saturday in 3 days if you do not release the funds that have already been appropriated to fund the SNAP program. 42 million Americans, and this is a choice that you are making to starve American children, elders, seniors, veterans, people with disabilities, because you think that this is a political game, and we are not here to play. So feed our children. Now I want to address this situation. There is money sitting in a contingency fund, billions of dollars that Congress has already appropriated to ensure that this did not happen to our country. That money is there. That is why 24 attorney generals for the states here in the US are suing right now to make sure that that money gets released, because they are choosing to not release it. Because apparently the White House seems to care more about building ballrooms, bailing out billionaires, billions for Argentina, blowing things up, than they care about feeding our kids, our federal workers, families on the brink, fixing healthcare, and firming up our national security, because literally everything that they are doing right now points to that. And like my colleague, Representative Brown, this is personal. It's not just personal for me because 1/4 of New Mexico families receive food assistance as part of how they put food on the table, but because I literally would not be standing here as your Congresswoman had it not been for investments in human potential like the food assistance program. Because like many New Mexicans, like many millions and millions of families out there, had we not had that safety net at times when my family struggled, I would not have made it. So I am standing here today as a proud Congresswoman because I was able to get by when I needed help. So shame on you, President. Shame on you, Johnson. Shame on you, Mr. Thune. You are choosing to take food off of the table of American families and our children. And it's immoral. It's unconscionable, and it is immoral. And the American people and our children are not a political game. So we call on this administration to get the president back to the United States. We call on Leader Thune and Speaker Johnson to come to the negotiating table. We call on our Republican colleagues who literally have not been here for 39 days to get back to Washington, D.C., to cut a bipartisan deal, to feed our families, to fix our healthcare system, and to reopen this government. And we are not going to back down. We are going to keep showing up for the American people. And with that, I would like to yield to the gentle lady from North Carolina, Miss Adams, Representative Adams.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. And I want to thank Representative Neguse and all of my colleagues for being here. Let me be clear. SNAP recipients are not political pawns. And we're not going to let Donald Trump and Republicans hold them hostage. Billions of dollars have already been allocated to the SNAP contingency fund, which would keep SNAP funded but the USDA refuses to use it. The White House would rather let the program lapse, but we all know that this is about choices. Donald Trump is choosing not to fund SNAP, but rather let 42 million Americans go hungry, including 34,000 households in my district in North Carolina, including 1.4 million people in our state. His choice is to hurt single mothers trying to feed their children, to hurt veterans who served our country, to hurt seniors on fixed incomes, to hurt Americans suffering from disabilities, to hurt working families trying to make the ends meet. And as I continue to say, working hard is not enough if you don't make enough. Donald Trump, he's the deal maker, we've heard. Well, where the hell is the great deal maker now? Democrats, well, we're in Washington. This week we're here, and we aren't on vacation like the Republicans. We're ready to make a deal, Mr. Deal Maker. We're ready to make a bipartisan deal that, first of all, would keep SNAP funded, that would reopen the government, that would extend the ACA tax credits and end the pain that's being inflicted on American people. Thank you. And Mr. Chair, I yield back to you.
Questions? Nick, and then we'll go to you. Yeah.
I wanted to ask about how you're thinking of this in the broader context. Like, how do you balance the needs of your constituents, who you're saying you're fighting for healthcare for, with the needs of the constituents who could very much go hungry in the coming days?
Well, first I would say I reject the premise of that particular question. They are not mutually exclusive. We are fighting for working families across our country, and I think the American people recognize that. But again, just to reinforce this point that you heard from Ranking Member Craig and all of my colleagues, with respect to SNAP funding in particular, it is a conscious, deliberate choice that the administration is making to not release the funds that have been appropriated for that purpose. That is why 26 states are suing the Trump administration and Secretary Rollins. Does anyone here not believe that with one phone call from Speaker Johnson, one phone call to the President of the United States or the Secretary of Agriculture, that those funds would be released tomorrow? Yes. And that families wouldn't go starving by the weekend? So I think it's important to dispense with again, rationalizations and excuses that Republicans have offered. They have made this choice. They know it. We know it. The American people know it as well. And we are imploring the administration to reverse course in the next 72 hours to save families in Colorado and New Mexico and Minnesota, Ohio, California, across the country. A simple request. Yes, sir.
Mr. Neguse, there's something like $6 billion in that contingency fund. It's not equal to the amount that SNAP would pay next month, and presumably it would be gone for December's benefits. So what would you do then when there's nothing in the contingency fund if the government is still shut down?
I'm going to ask Ranking Member Craig to answer this question, but I will just say first, the roughly $5 billion or so, $5.2 billion, would go a long way. Right. We're talking about families that will go hungry beginning this weekend. Yes. So addressing this acute crisis in front of us. But in addition, the basis of the lawsuit that was filed yesterday, and we'll be meeting with attorney generals later this afternoon in regards to that particular lawsuit, there are multiple bases, including Section 32 funds that are available, roughly $23 billion that the administration could use as well today. But I'll let Ranking Member Craig expound on that.
Mr. Neguse answered that pretty well. We believe there is $5.25 billion in the contingency fund that they have really no choice but to use toward November benefits, that it is illegal not to use those contingency funds for this purpose. And you all have seen now literally the shutdown plan that was on the USDA website listed this in the event of a shutdown. From a Section 32 perspective, we believe that there is $23 billion estimated in that account, and we just saw the administration tap into it for WIC funding 2 weeks ago. So, one, legally required. Two, the administration is making a choice not to pay November SNAP benefits. We all hope that when the president comes back from Asia, we all hope when he's done obsessing with bailing out Argentina, that he will come back to the United States of America, finally put America first, like he promised many of the voters in my congressional district, and get back to the negotiating table, reopen the government, so we aren't here in in December again, trying to decide whether or not SNAP benefits are going to go out. Sure.
I want to just add a little bit of color and explanation for anyone that has never been on SNAP before to help understand why the release of funds now is vital. For the vast majority of SNAP beneficiaries, they're extremely low income. And the way that families essentially put food on the table is that money gets transferred from USDA to the states, and then that is transferred onto an EBT card, which is a debit card. You can use that at a grocery store, at a farmer's market, at your local convenience store. But many families, because they're living on the edge, and this is not the entire amount of money that helps them get groceries. It's $6 a day. If you're a family of 4, you're not filling your belly with $6 a day. It's what is keeping you from falling off the edge, right? And so many SNAP beneficiaries actually, by the time they get to the end of the month, they've already spent their entire SNAP benefits. So these families were already likely in crisis this week. And now they're hearing that on Saturday, when they plan to go grocery shopping, that money's not going to be on their EBT card. That means on Saturday, millions of families across this country literally will not be able to buy groceries. And I want to just emphasize this. The vast majority of SNAP beneficiaries are people with disabilities. They're seniors on fixed incomes. They're people like my mom, who literally couldn't even make it to the end of the month without that extra support. These are children in the foster care system. I don't know what image people have of who are SNAP beneficiaries, but those are the people who are literally not going to be able to go grocery shopping. And let me just say this. Our food banks are gearing up all across the country to try to address the crisis, but there is not sufficient bandwidth, money, food, or infrastructure to feed every single American family that will not be able to get groceries on Saturday. And so there are children and there are elders, some of which are homebound and otherwise unable to get access to food, who literally will not have food on Saturday. This is an emergency. That is why there is an emergency contingency plan. So even if that cannot fund groceries for the entire month of November, it will make sure that those children and those seniors don't starve on Saturday. Does that make sense?
Administrative enforcement effectively beginning on November 1st, just as these funds are getting ready to run out. I've been told that this means that recipients and state agencies could face a dual administrative crisis, one driven by the lack of federal funding and another driven by this federal red tape, as it's been called. Can you speak to kind of that double whammy that families could face, not only not receiving funds as early as this weekend, but also dealing with the impact of the new paperwork requirements from the reconciliation law that was passed this summer?
Well, I would say, and I'll ask our ranking member to expound on this a bit, I agree the way that you've described it. I think the confluence of decisions made by the Trump administration and House Republicans, of course, embedded in the law that they passed earlier this year, have created a real crisis for working families as it relates to SNAP. And in my view, it provides you with the answer to the question of why the Trump administration is deciding to violate the law by refusing to release these funds. We know why. Because they don't support SNAP. How do we know that? Because they cut SNAP earlier this year, over the summer, in the Republican reconciliation bill that the president signed into law. To do what? To pay for billions of tax cuts for the richest Americans in our country. Billionaires and some of the biggest corporations. So I think the American people understand well the context in which this decision is being made by the Trump administration. It is an immoral decision, in my view. But I'm happy to defer to our ranking member.
That's exactly right. The additional paperwork requirements, in addition to raising the age for work requirements under SNAP, in addition to all of the other barriers that the big beautiful bill will put in place, including a cost shift to the states in the hopes that the states, or in 10 cases around the country, the counties who actually have responsibility for paying for future benefits. All of this was with the intention of driving people off SNAP. $6.20 a day is what SNAP pays. And as my colleague, Ms. Stansberry, said, this does not come close to covering even one trip to the grocery store a month for most American families, especially as this administration has started a trade war that is driving up costs for everyone in our country. So this is exactly the point. This is why the Congressional Budget Office in the big beautiful bill said when you cut SNAP by $186 billion, which, by the way, my Republican colleagues have refused to admit that this is even a benefit cut at this point. Their talking points are that they actually didn't cut SNAP. Millions of Americans, millions of people are coming off of the SNAP program because they will not be able to overcome the barriers that this administration is putting in place. And it's cruel.
Yes.
I wanted to ask if you had seen or looked at either the dueling proposals in the Senate, one by Republicans, one by Democrats, for bills to keep SNAP funded through the shutdown, and what you thought of those, and whether you've spoken to your counterparts in the Senate about some kind of coordinated push maybe on legislation like that.
I'm familiar with the proposals, and I know that many of my colleagues, Representative Stansberry and others, have proposed legislation here in the House as well. Those conversations will continue. But ultimately, I think, again, I'm belaboring this, but it matters, and it's important for us to communicate this. We do not need to, legislation doesn't need to be passed in order for these funds to be released. It is the law. Let me repeat it. It is the law. The Trump administration is required to release those funds today. That is why the administration is now embroiled in federal litigation, in federal court in Massachusetts, that I ultimately think will be successful. And the administration will be compelled eventually to release those funds. The question is whether that decision will happen before families go hungry or after. That's really, in my view, the stakes. We'll go, yes, sir, and then we'll go over here.
If we come to November 1st and these contingency funds haven't been released, if nothing has been accomplished in restoring SNAP benefits, will you call on your Democratic colleagues to reopen the government and deal with these shutdown crises immediately, deal with health care conversations once the government is reopened?
So let me ask you a question. The basis for your question is, and maybe the better way to state it would be, if the Trump administration continues to violate the law, if the Trump administration unlawfully refuses to release funds so that families in Colorado don't go hungry, if the Trump administration refuses to follow the law, as they have for the better course of the last 9 months, violating statute after statute, if in that scenario these actions unfold, then how will Democrats respond? That, my view, would be a more fair characterization of the question that you've posed, because it does feel a little bit like we're in the twilight zone here, with an administration that is lawless, violates the law with impunity, is now doing so with respect to the release of funds for families that may go hungry. We're here in Washington, you're here in Washington, House Republicans are gone, 6 weeks and counting, gone, literally gone. Won't show up in Washington, won't do town halls back in their respective districts. And somehow the question is posed to House Democrats as to how we will respond. The Trump administration needs to follow the law. And insofar, you've heard all my colleagues repeatedly suggest we would like to negotiate an agreement in good faith with our Republican colleagues. That is why we're here in our nation's capital. Question should be posed to Republicans. When will they get serious about working with us in good faith so that we can reach an agreement? And the passion you hear is frustration with the fact that Republicans could just simply abandon their post for 6 weeks, that the Trump administration can just violate the law without consequence. It should offend everyone. It certainly offends me.
Well, so if
Yeah,
they don't follow the law.
I'm going to jump up here to the next question. Yes, sir. And then I'll give it to Alma. Yeah.
I wanted to ask, are there any negotiations at the leadership level, any progress being made to try to end the government shutdown, or is everybody just dug in? And then second question for you, in Colorado, Governor Polis has announced some money to help with food assistance. What will be the impact for folks who are living in Colorado if this, on November 1st, does not change?
I want to, I'll address the Colorado question and then give my colleague Alma Adams an opportunity to talk about what's happening in North Carolina as well. With respect to Colorado, grateful for Governor Polis's leadership in shepherding a coalition in the state, attempting to create a revenue stream to help our food banks and community organizations bridge the gap during what is going to be a very difficult time if, in fact, these funds aren't released. Devastating impacts. I held an event with food banks in my district in western Colorado and northern Colorado, and it is heartbreaking. So we're certainly leaning in, my office, and I think the same could be said of all my Democratic colleagues in Colorado, doing everything we can to help the governor in his efforts. With respect to the first part of your question, the leader, Leader Jeffries, will be having a press conference this afternoon. So you certainly, I think you'll hear from him with respect to any substantive updates on that regard. I would just simply say the president has left the Capitol. He's not in the United States. Republicans, as I said, are on vacation. The speaker, you've heard every day, he shows up to his daily press conference and delivers the same message, which is essentially, we will not negotiate with anyone on anything for any reason. That's his negotiating position until Donald Trump tells him that he's allowed to negotiate. So beyond that, I don't know that I have a substantive update on that front for you. But Representative Adams.
Thank you. I just wanted to sort of respond to the gentleman here. This is really a question that should be asked of Republicans. What are they going to do? Because this is not a partisan issue. If you're hungry, it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or Republican or you claim no party affiliation at all. But we should be concerned, most especially because almost half of the people that we're talking about are children. They're going to bed hungry every night. I have 164,000 people in my district who are food insecure. 50% of those are children. And so this is not a partisan issue. It doesn't really matter what it's not about a blue state or a red state. It's a red, white, and blue issue. It's an American issue. Feeding people is a basic right. And when you talk about those $6 a day, nobody here could survive, even as a supplement. It's a supplement. But this is an emergency, and so we have an emergency fund. That's what emergency funds are for. And so the question should be, we should ask our Republicans, are you going to allow your constituents in your districts to go hungry? Because they are.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Jerry Hagstrom from the Hagstrom Report. You mentioned that you're going to meet with the attorneys general later today. I'm wondering if you're hoping that the lawsuit that's been filed will be taken up by the courts, and so that they might issue something that the administration has to issue the benefits on Saturday. And then the second question is, after you meet with these attorneys general, are you planning any kind of media availability?
I would say with respect to the second part of your question, we will engage with our colleague, the attorney generals who are proceeding with this lawsuit. House Democrats have a litigation task force that we assembled earlier this year, and so we'll continue to consult with them and provide any updates at the appropriate time in terms of any actions that House Democrats might take in support of that litigation. I'm certainly hopeful for a quick ruling because as you have heard, the urgency is very real on the ground for the families that we represent, that we're so privileged to serve. And I thought Representative Brown articulated so well the real urgency in her district in Cleveland. I don't know, if Representative Brown, if you want to expound on that a bit.
Thank you, Leader Neguse. It is, it's a manufactured crisis. This is the Republican shutdown. They control the House, the Senate, and the White House, and they have surrendered their responsibilities in the Congress to the service of the president. It is our hope as we show up here day after day on duty while they're on vacation that we can reopen the government. That is the goal. I don't think that anyone, especially here right now, wants to see this continue. They can make these things happen right now. They have demonstrated the capacity and the ability to creatively find resources for the things that they want to do. And so this just is a demonstration of what their priorities are. So back in my district, my priorities are the people who sent me here to represent them. I represent the people of Ohio's 11th Congressional District, and I take that responsibility very seriously. I really wish my Republican colleagues would do the same for their constituents.
I think you've heard it resoundingly here from my colleagues and I. It's time for our Republican colleagues to get serious. The president has been very focused on his ballroom, on bailing out Argentina. It is time for the administration to focus on serving the American people. And there's a simple way they can do it. Follow the law. Release the funds so that hungry families don't go starving this weekend. Thank you all for being here. Appreciate it.
Make a deal.